Today's guest on A Life and a Living is a good friend of mine, Josh Patrick, who is an entrepreneur. He's been a business owner in the past. He's a consultant, and he's also the author of a couple of books. And we're talking about his most recent book, which is The Sale Ready Company, that we go into in some detail. But I said Josh has got a huge amount of experience, both as a business owner in his own right in the hospitality area, but also working in the wealth management and consultancy business. So a man with huge depth of knowledge. And he talks about in the book that he writes, which he writes the parable about the challenges facing somebody who owns a business and is looking to exit the business. And it's a family business with some family members involved in that, and how he goes about exiting and the issues and the challenges therein. And there's some great tips in that for all of us, whether you run a business or you're employed, it doesn't make any difference. But there's some real nuggets in there for us to embrace in terms of making our businesses more efficient and more effective, and also more attractive to either hand over or to sell to existing people within the business or to somebody new outside who may be attracted to purchase it. So really encourage you to listen to Josh. He's got a fountain of wisdom, practical to the bone, I can tell you, and a really enjoyable conversation. So sit back and listen to the very interesting Josh Patrick. Josh, great to have you here on A Life and a Living podcast. I'm delighted to get you on here to share about your new book. But maybe first, what you might do is give a little bit of background to yourself, what's the work that you do, but also, what was it that prompted you to write The Sale Ready Company?
Well, first of all, John, nice seeing you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
I've been working for myself as a private business owner for the last 40 some odd years. And I owned a food service and vending company where we fed people in factories. We grew that from one part-time employee to 90 full-time employees when I sold that in 1995. Then went into the wealth management business, and my natural market, or people I should be working with, were other blue-collar business owners. So I've built my business on that. And the reason I wrote the book was that too many people in the advice business are either technically competent on the economics of the business, or they're coaches and they can help people coach about life. Very few can do both. And one thing about business is that nobody ever writes about, and I think is a really big deal, is there's two sides to a business. There's personal sustainability and there's economic sustainability. And businesses often focus on one or the other. They're both important. In fact, they're both equally important, and they both have to be dealt with in very different ways. So the book, The Sale Ready Company, is about a family. It's a business parable, which means that it's a novel. And the story goes is that the owner of the business is getting ready to transition out. And when you get ready to transition out of a business, there's lots of things you might be considering. Can I afford to leave? Is one. Another is, after I leave, how am I going to spend my time? Another is, who's going to be the next owner of the business? Will it be my kids? Will it be my managers? Will it be a third party? You need to have a methodology for investigating all three and deciding which one is the right one for you. And you have to say, gee, this is my preferred method of leaving, but what happens if the stuff that will allow me to leave doesn't happen? What do I do then? So it's always important to say, what's my plan B? And that's where scenario planning comes in. Mm-hmm. So in the book, we conquer all that sort of stuff. We talk about, what will the owner do next? Who's going to take over the business? And we bring in the owner's wife as a major player in this book. And the reason is the spouse of the business owner is very, very involved in a privately held business. Too many consultants never realize that, and they never bring the spouse into the plan. And that's why a lot of these major transition plans never happen, because the spouse isn't on board.
Yeah. So can I bring you back to what you're saying? Because I wanted to. I thought your point about bringing the partner in was actually really important. I want to come back and talk about that. But you talked about the business sustainability and you talked about the personal sustainability. Can you maybe just elaborate exactly? I mean, I think I know what you mean, but maybe just elaborate exactly what you mean by both.
Okay, so personal sustainability is, how am I spending my time at work? Am I getting burned out? Am I energized? Do I love what I do? Am I spending time doing stuff that's in my unique ability area, to quote Dan Sullivan? Um, the thing here that people don't realize is that if you're burned out, it's because you've been doing the same tactical things over and over and over again in your business. And it's probably not a unique ability area. So you have limited energy for that activity, but you believe you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can teach you to be an effective delegator, which we do, and that's part of the process of the book, you're likely to leave burnout behind and have more fun running your business. Economic sustainability is, is the business creating enough excess cash to fill what we call the 4 buckets of profit? And the 4 buckets of profit is the lifestyle you live, having an emergency fund that's enough to fund your business for 6 months of operation should the worst happen, like COVID. Our deal of fully funded growth program, not just marketing program, but growth, because growing your business costs money. And finally, do you have a fully funded retirement plan? Because the sale of your business will not get you to retirement about 95% of the time. So if you're doing enough excess cash, those 4 things, you now have an economic sustainability. And if you learn how to be a good delegator, you have personal sustainability. So those are the 2 things that are going at both times. And as a business owner, you need to pay attention to both if you want to have a long career. You know, before we started, John, you and I were talking about retirement, and neither of us are in favor of it. But we're not unusual.
Yeah.
You know, if you love what you do and you like the business, and most business owners basically like their business, they like their customers, they like their employees, they just can't figure out how to get a little bit more time for themselves. They don't want to completely leave the business because all their social contacts fall off when that happens.
Yeah,
What
that's
they do
true.
want is they want a little bit more time for themselves.
Mm.
Now, some people call it work-life balance, and I hate that term.
So do
I
I.
like
It's my pet hate. Right.
yes, I do like the term work-life integration.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
If I to go back to the title of the book, The Sale Ready Company, what is your definition of sale ready?
oh, it's really simple. A business that somebody else wants to own.
Right. Okay. But I mean, if you're looking at that business, if you're developing the business, because very often businesses are developed and actually they're not saleable at all because they're so
Right.
dependent on the individual who set the business up that the minute that individual steps out, there isn't a business, right?
Yes.
So what are the things when you're building the business that you need to ensure that the business actually is saleable?
Well, it depends if you, I mean, I like to use the term transferable instead of saleable.
Mm-hmm.
So, because a saleable business means there's a recurring revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
And saleable means that a third party buyer would want to buy it. The truth is most businesses are transferred either to managers or children. They're not
Right.
sold to a third party.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it's basically you have to have a business with enough cash flow that supports buying out the owner. That would be sale ready for the internal transfer. Sale ready for an outside buyer is a whole different ballgame. That means you have to have systems, you have to have managers, you have to have recurring cash flow if you really want to get a sale for your company. Now, you have to, what's your definition of a sale to a company? In the wealth management world, most smaller wealth management firms are sold for 35% down and 65% owner financing. High risk there. When I'm talking about sale ready, I'm talking about 90 to 95% down at closing with no more than 5 or 10% going into escrow.
Right.
Not owner financing, escrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you need to have a business that has strong cash flow. It has to have systems. You have to be out of the day-to-day operation of your business, which means you have to become operationally free from your business. If you don't do that, then your business is not going to be attractive to a third-party buyer.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could be very attractive to your management team,
Yes.
but it won't be attractive to a third-party buyer. So you need to, and then there's a group where you don't even have any managers. There's no internal person to buy it. You basically have 3 people in your company. It's all based on you.
Mm.
Well, that's a whole different strategy altogether. And those folks don't ever sell their company. They should either, what they often do is just close it down. But what they should do is they should wind it down, which means they use the 80-20 rule. They get rid of 80% of their clients, they keep 20% of their clients. And the truth is that 20% is 80% of the revenue anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah,
Especially if
exactly.
especially if you're in the same business for 40 years, because you have all these legacy clients that you brought in when you first started, you would never take them on today.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Can I ask you in terms of the because you mentioned there that you wrote the book as a story, as a novel. Why write it as a story or a parable rather than the traditional how-to?
I speak to blue collar business owners a lot, and it's written for a blue collar business owner, which means that your frontline workers wear blue collars and they actually work with their hands.
Yeah.
Um, and they don't read how-to books. They don't read at all, actually. Now, I can entice them to read if it's a story. And the
Right.
interesting thing is I've had a whole bunch of people read who are not even involved in business. And they are dying to have the 3rd book because they want to know what happened.
So you got a trilogy on your hand.
Well, it's actually a quadrilogy right now, and it could be a
Okay.
secondary.
All right. Okay.
I just made up 2 words.
But one of the things you talk about in that, and correct me if I got this wrong, but I think we were saying that is that the process of planning is more important than the plan itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so maybe elaborate on that.
Plans are absolutely useless. A plan, especially in today's environment, we're in a fast changing environment. So having a planning process gives you a process to know what to work on in the next 90 to 180 days. You might be able to plan out a year. But my guess is if I write a plan and I say, this is my plan for the year, I can promise you that that plan will change during the year. That's planning. So planning means I'm flexible. A plan means I am unflexible. And the worst thing you can be in business is being unflexible for things that come along the way. So if you understand the planning process and you have a framework for doing that, then you're going to be able to handle change much more easily than somebody who does a plan and sticks it on the shelf. The other thing is nobody reads plans. The planning process is what happens. You know, John, you work with big corporations and they're famous for, you know, having a strategic planning department that writes these gigantic plans that never get implemented.
Absolutely.
And if you notice, there's a methodology out for software development. It's called Scrum. And I'm a big fan of Scrum. I use it for everything. I want my construction clients to use it. I want my manufacturing clients to use it. I want my service business to use it. One of the things about Scrum, it's a planning process. It's not a plan. It's something you do for 1, 2, or 3 weeks. And then you look back and you say, what went wrong? What went right? How can we build on the things that are right? And how can we make the velocity of what we're doing faster and better? That's a planning process. If I did a plan, I might say, okay, we need to do this, 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 and this. Now that in the old planning world or strategic planning world, that would be called waterfall method. Well, if you've ever used a Gantt chart, which is what waterfall is, and one piece goes out, you have to go back and redo the entire chart. But if I'm using a Scrum type process, if something doesn't work, I have a daily huddle where I can say, this isn't working, and we can adjust it on the fly. We're not waiting until the end of the year to go through another plan and write another plan.
Just to maybe dig into that a little bit. So if you're working with a client, Josh, and you're saying, okay, we are going to embed this the kind of Scrum and this process into the organization. So do you sit down with the team and say, okay, well, let's at a high level maybe have a look at the what we actually want to do over the next 12 months, and then we actually break it down into and use scrums to actually decide what we're actually going to do over the shorter period. Is that the approach that you take, or do you do the high level at all?
It depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right.
It really depends if we are working in urgent and important, or we're working on important but not urgent.
Right.
If
Okay.
it's important but not urgent, I have the ability to go out a year.
Mhm.
If I'm working on important and urgent, I'm not especially concerned about what's happening in a year from now. I'm concerned about what's happening today, because
Yeah.
I've got a big problem today that needs to be solved. Now, what I hope people end up doing is that they put processes in place that bring that important and urgent down to almost nothing. So almost all the planning you're doing is important but not urgent.
Mhm.
And important but not urgent means it doesn't need to be done today. If it's
Yeah.
done tomorrow, the day after, you're probably okay. But
Mhm.
eventually, if you don't do that, it becomes important and urgent, and you're now behind the eight ball, and you're being reactive, which costs you money.
One of the to come back to what we touched on earlier on, and one of the interesting things that you bring into the book, and I think the fact that you write it as a story actually makes it interesting, makes it readable, and makes it that people can identify with it. But I thought it was very powerful the way you brought in the partner. In this case, was Anne, into the story, and how important, even though she wasn't actively involved in the business, but how important what the decisions that were made in the business had on her, and as a consequence had on the owner of the business. Maybe just talk a little bit about that and how that can be done in a more seamless fashion than just actually being forgotten about, or at the last minute, oh Christ, we better do something about, right?
Well, the first thing you want to do is in the early part of an engagement or early part of a planning process, you want to have all the stakeholders who are there at the table in
Mm.
some level. Now, you don't need to bring customers in, and you may not bring in your frontline employees, but you certainly want to bring in your spouse, especially if the business is going to be transferred to your children and one child is going to become the owner and the other child is not. I will promise you that your spouse has an opinion about that.
Mhm.
And if you don't deal with that opinion and you're an advisor, you're likely going to get fired. That's happened to me. So I can tell you that from personal experience. If you're trying to transfer your business, you're either going to end up getting divorced or have some really unhappy conversations.
Mm.
So your spouse is part of your business, and your spouse is mostly scared about what you're doing because they don't understand it, because you're not spent any time explaining to them what you're doing and why you're doing it. And your spouse is really a pretty good sounding board because they're likely to tell you the truth, and nobody else in your business will. I mean, your
Yeah.
employees aren't going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Your suppliers aren't going to tell you the truth. And most people never bother to ask their customers who will tell you the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah, but I mean, the other interesting thing that I thought you brought into it there was in this case with Anne, you know, the guy retiring, he's now going to be at home. She's already got a life created, right? That
Yes,
likely doesn't include him because he hasn't been around.
right.
And now he is going to be around, and he's kind of he's kind of going to be in her way and going to be under her feet. So how do you get them to start the conversation about how they're going to be together?
Well, what we do is we have an experience of them being together.
Mm.
So if I'm coaching someone to leave their business, I don't care who the next owner is going to be. The first stage is you take a week off, you don't call in, you don't talk to your um, uh, any of your managers, and you stay at home. You're not
Mm.
going to go out and have fun and have a vacation. You're just off for a week, and you're going to be around the house for a week. See how that goes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Yeah, go on.
Then the next thing is you do it for 2 weeks. And then you do it for 3 weeks. And then you do it for 4 weeks. And if you can do it for 4 weeks where you're not on vacation, you're not going out, you're not doing special events, you're not having special experience, you're just living a normal life, and you both cannot kill each other, then you're probably ready to think about leaving your business. But too many people just do it. And one of the largest groups of divorces is people over 65 are getting divorced like crazy.
Yeah.
And
from your experience, Josh, people doing that, what, from your experience of it with your clients, when they actually experience that, is this a big surprise to them? Do they suddenly kind of go, "Oh my God Almighty"? Is this kind of it is that, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, because I do remember actually a friend of mine, a couple of and he was retiring, and he was in the corporate world, so he was going to do, which is not something that you or I would advise anyone to do. He was going to kind of work up until the Friday, every hour that God sends, and then Monday he was going to have nothing to do, right?
Yes.
And I can remember talking to his wife, and she's saying, "I'm really frightened of it," right? Really, really, I would justify it. I mean, they had a good marriage, they had a good relationship, but she had a life, and he was now going to be interfering with that, and he was not going to be understanding about that.
Right. So what happens after he retires? They get divorced.
Yeah, exactly, which is not really great. The other thing you talk about in the story is this alignment conversation. Do you want to just elaborate on what you mean by the alignment conversation?
Yeah, it's too often that advisors to business owners walk in with a solution looking for a problem. So the alignment conversation is designed to make the client the expert in the engagement. And they're the expert on what they want to have happen in their life. The alignment conversation is really simple. Where are you today? Where do you want to be at some point in the future? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? I generally go 3 years. What's the gap between those two? And then I, as an advisor, can answer the question, gee, do I have the ability to help this person get to where they are, to where they want to be? And is there enough value in that for them to pay me money? And then we just say, do you want help? And we both know Michael Port. Michael Port has a very, very fancy closing line.
Yeah.
If they say yes, I say, well, great. Would you like me to help you? There's my close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not complicated. Not
complicated. But really what it does is it puts the client or the person I'm talking with into the role of the expert, not me. I'm the role of the thinking partner or the guide. My job is not to tell you what you need to do. Too many times I hear advisors say, my client needs to do X, Y, Z. No, they don't. Maybe it will be useful for them to do that to get to a particular outcome. But what if that particular outcome is not what they want? Maybe they want something else.
Yeah.
We should not be the experts. We are the guide. We might have a certain amount of expertise, but we shouldn't play the role of the expert.
Yeah, very, very good. Josh, this is great. I love the way you've written it. I love the story. I think it's interesting. And, I said it kind of pushes you to probably write another one so people see what happens in the next installment of all these people's lives. But I would certainly highly recommend to anyone to go and buy the book, The Sale Ready Company. Before we wrap up, and I'd ask you where people can get in touch with you, Josh, just a question I ask everybody, a book other than your own that has had an impact upon you.
Well, if you're in the private business world and you want a system to run your business, which is a great system, I'm a huge fan of the entrepreneurial operating system. And the way you learn about this, you read a book called Traction by Gino Wickman.
Yes.
Which I think if you have between 25 and 200 employees and you haven't read that book, you must read that book. It is a must read. Simple. It's not overly complicated, and has tons of really good actionable methodologies in there.
Okay, great. I've come across, I haven't read it actually. I must read it. It's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, EOS is huge. I mean, it's probably the largest in of the private business consulting systems that's used. He has a very large network of consultants who have been trained and go out and help people implement EOS.
Absolutely. So, Josh, where can people get in touch with you? Where can they buy the book? We'll put everything in the show notes, but just anybody listening right now, how can they get in touch with you?
Getting in touch with me is really easy. Just go to jpatrick@stage2planning.com. That's the number 2. That's my email address. Send me an email. I'm pretty much email addicted. I get back pretty quickly usually. I'm happy to have a free 20-minute conversation with anybody. And to get the book, I have a book site set up. It's www.salereadycompany.com. You can buy the book for half price there. It's just for $7.95. And if you buy it off our site, you get a bunch of bonuses of how-tos. I've written ebooks and checklists and infographics on what it takes to create a sale-ready company, which are the how-tos that I talk about in the book. And or you can just go to any place books are sold. Amazon's got it up there right now. And if you buy the book, I ask you to do one thing. Please give it an honest rating and review.
Brilliant. We'll put all of that in the show notes. Josh, thank you so much indeed for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the book. You don't need luck because I think it's really well written and it's really well done. I think it's a great story and a story that people need to hear. So good luck with that, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you, John. It was so much fun being with you.